Welcome to Swing State, our weekly look at what's going on in the world of politics and how it all affects you. I'm Fox 8 senior political reporter Bob Buckley, and I'll be your host. We're going to be talking live with the key figures running for all the biggest offices, and we're starting with the top of the state, the governor's race. And joining me tonight is Republican gubernatorial candidate Bill Graham. Bill is an attorney from Salisbury, and you may well have seen some of his ads on the air. Bill, welcome.
Glad to be here, Bob.
You know, a lot of these political shows, they get so much into the weeds. They lose some of the big picture ideas and questions. And I want to start with one of those. Simply, why did you get in this race?
I got into the race because I want to bring a conservative future to North Carolina. And that future looks like lower taxes, safer communities, and more parental involvement in education. And that's what that future looks like. And I'm committed to bringing that future to all North Carolinians.
And those are all issues you've been looking at the rundown that we're going to get into as this half hour goes along. This is not your first foray into this. You ran for the governor in 2008, finished third out of 5.
Yep.
How is this race different?
Social media, but you know, this time I'm using that tool to bring that conservative future that I talked about. You know, lowering taxes at the grocery store. I'm a former prosecutor, which we may talk about, and making sure that parents, again, get involved in their children's education. Those are the 3 points. And they're different, but also the same than last time because, you know, we're post this pandemic, and folks at the grocery store, they'll notice that 20% higher rate than they were pre-pandemic. And while the inflation rate is coming down, prices are staying the same.
That's a big idea, bringing down prices at the grocery store for a governor.
Yeah.
Can the governor really do a lot with
that? You can, the sales tax. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a margin there. Right now, it's what, 1% of most foods.
Yep.
And so there's not a lot of wiggle room there.
Well, it adds up. You know, I was in the grocery store the other day, and a lady was going through the line, and she had some milk and bread and, you know, the usual staples things, and there was a couple extra things in there, and she couldn't make it through. She had to take some stuff out of her cart and put it back on the shelf, and you know, I was thinking about it. So many people are living just getting by, and anything that the state can do helps everyone be able to make that extra purchase.
You know, and you come at this with some experience of not exactly living the elite life necessarily growing up. I want to get into some of that because I think it informs who you are. You were raised by your grandparents.
Yes.
What happened there? That's not a normal situation.
Well, you know, family history, but we ended up living. I was raised by my grandparents in Kannapolis. My grandfather was a pharmacist. Grandmother stayed at home, raised me. I went to. My mom got remarried. We went down to Eastern North Carolina, and I lived in Dunn for a while, and then moved to Ireland, and then came back because my dad was working in the textile industry. Which, ironically, when I got into college at Catawba, I didn't have a whole lot to rub together like a lot of your viewers there, so I ended up working in a mill as well. So I worked in a No. 5 weave room, and I learned that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a weave room, so I got my degree, went to college and law school, and became a prosecutor in Cabarrus Rowan County.
We're going to get into some of the issues, but one last thing before we do. You said that it's time to put Republicans back on the winning path.
Well, I mean,
when it comes to governor.
Yeah.
Let me give you some numbers.
Yeah.
Republicans have won 1 of the last 8 gubernatorial elections dating back to 1992. Republicans have won 3 of the last 13 dating back to 1976. 4 of the last 31 dating back to 1900, and a grand total of 5 races for governor in the last 38 dating back to 1876. So how do you as a Republican change that?
You take a conservative message to the people. You talk about lowering their taxes. You talk about making their communities safer, and you talk about getting their children back to reading and writing and arithmetic, the basics, instead of the indoctrination that so many people complain about.
Because certainly many of those Democrats were conservative over the years, if you go back 150 years.
Some may wear that badge and some may not.
Right, because I'm saying when you lose 33 out of 38, there's something in that recipe that you're looking to change. And you're saying being conservative will change that.
Well, I think being conservative, but the conservative message is lower taxes, smaller government, being more aggressive in the courtroom, and putting criminals behind bars and keeping them there, attacking drugs, the fentanyl that's coming across the border, hitting the immigration issue hard. You can do that as governor, and lowering taxes. This is a very different state than it was years and years ago. A lot of folks have moved here from other parts of the country, and I think that they're waiting for someone who has business experience, which I do, and you know, the other experiences that I've had, you know, starting businesses, hiring people. I'm the only candidate in the race that's ever started a business and ever created a job. So on either side. So I have that business experience. I have that background in being a former prosecutor that will serve the people well.
We're going to start getting into the issues, and I wanted to get this one in before we have to take a break. I'm not sure we'll get it all in, but the border, you know, border security is historically a federal issue. Recently, everyone's getting involved. Though earlier this month, North Carolina State House sent a letter to Governor Cooper saying every state is now a border state, and insisting that the governor stand with Texas and send National Guard troops to the border there. Several points on this that we can hit. Maybe we have to do one of them now, one of them a little later in the show. Would you support those ideas? Would you, as governor, support sending our National Guard soldiers to the border in Texas and Arizona?
If the proper procedures were followed, yes.
What about the idea of refusing to take migrants into our state that are being sent everywhere from these other states?
Are you talking about Governor Abbott's?
Or any of these states, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, if their governors want to say, like they have to these sanctuary cities, they've sent them to New York, to Chicago, other cities, would you say, hey, I'm not taking those migrants as a governor?
Yes.
Okay. They've got to go somewhere.
Not here.
Okay.
Let's be clear about this. Right. These are people that have come across the border illegally. They're here illegally. I know many are asking for asylum, but when I ran the first time, this was an issue that I addressed 16 years ago. And I said, you cannot be for something that starts with the word illegal. And I adhere to that today. If you are here committing crime or you're here illegally, you are here illegally. You're breaking the law, and you should be deported forthwith.
All right, we're going to get a little bit more into that in a second, but first, a lot more to talk about as well tonight, including how much control you as parents should have over your child's education, whether some drug dealers deserve the death sentence. But first, when we get back, we'll talk about this Republican race for governor and the man leading it, because he may be the one politician more controversial than former President Donald Trump. That's it.
Hardee's Double Deals start at $2.99. Choose a double cheeseburger, bacon double cheeseburger, or new barbecue bacon double cheeseburger. $2.99 never looked so good. Hardee's, goodness in the making. Get exclusive offers on the Hardee's app.
Change is never easy. There will be naysayers, doubters, and critics. You may even give up for a moment, only to start again another day. Because you believe in moving to the beat of your own drum, in passing down lifelong skills, in your ability to lose weight and keep it off. And when you believe you can succeed, you already have.
Wegovy is for adults with obesity and shouldn't be used with semaglutide or GLP-1 medicines. Don't take Wegovy if you or your family have medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if allergic to it. Stop Wegovy and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or an allergic reaction. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis and gallbladder problems. Wegovy may cause low blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes, especially if you take medicines to treat type 2 diabetes. Tell your provider about vision problems or changes, or if you feel your heart racing while at rest. Depression or thoughts of suicide may occur. Call your provider right away if you have any mental changes. Common side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea may lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
So keep on believing, because it's not just about the weight you lose. It's about everything you gain. Believe on. Wegovy.
High Point University is the premier life skills university where student transformation is focused on personal initiative and extraordinary career outcomes.
High Point University gives you 1,000,001 amazing opportunities.
What life skills truly means is being able to go the level above. You learn from the textbooks and understanding the knowledge, yes, but then you have to take it and apply it. That practicality just made sense to me.
The opportunities available here are unlike at any other school.
Choose to be extraordinary at High Point University.
Fox 8 proudly celebrates Black History Month. Join us Tuesday at 7:30 as we honor the achievements and legacies of African Americans in the Triad. Honoring Black History. Tuesday at 7:30 on Fox 8.
Hardee's Double Deals start at $2.99. Choose a double cheeseburger, bacon double cheeseburger, or new barbecue bacon double cheeseburger. $2.99 never looked so good. Hardee's, goodness in the making. Get exclusive offers on the Hardee's app.
And welcome back to Swing State. I'm Bob Buckley. With me tonight is Republican gubernatorial candidate Bill Graham. And as I think most people who would be inclined to watch the show know, you're not the only one in this race. In Greensboro's Mark Robinson is the Republican frontrunner in every poll, at least that I have seen. If you don't know his background, Robinson wasn't involved in electoral politics until a speech that he gave at the Greensboro City Council in April of 2018 went viral and catapulted him to the lieutenant governor's office, and he's now, of course, running for governor. You have taken aim at him in this race to a degree, and we want to take a look with one of the ads you have about Mark Robinson and then talk about it. Take a look.
When you read about Mark Robinson's past, the facts are disturbing.
Robinson has a history of making anti-Semitic statements.
Robinson downplayed the Nazis, suggested the Holocaust wasn't real.
He wrote, "This foolishness about Hitler disarming millions of Jews and then marching them off to concentration camps is a bunch of hogwash."
And Robinson still believes it.
Do you apologize for writing what you wrote?
I apologize for the wording, not necessarily for the content.
It's disgusting. Mark Robinson, he's just plain wrong for North Carolina.
You're not the first, Bill, to attack Mark Robinson on these ideas, but not only does he not back away from them, but it doesn't seem like it's even hurting him in the polls. What do you make of all that?
I don't think there's been any polls since the ad that I could point to. So I think once these ads have sort of sunk in and let the people see who he really is, because Mark Robinson is not who you think he is. He's not really been defined. You know the name. You know he's lieutenant governor, but you don't know anything about him. My job is to define him and let the voters know what I'm standing for, but where he is as well, to draw that contrast for the voters when they go in the voting booth, they can make the right decision.
And that ad focuses on statements he's made about the Holocaust.
Yes.
We have a fairly large Jewish community in the state, but my guess is you feeling this is going to resonate far beyond the Jewish community.
Well, you know, he's walking around here campaigning that he's a conservative. And you can't be a conservative and make light of the Holocaust, say that it's hogwash, say that it's foolishness, which we said in the ad, and make light of the 6 million Jews that passed away in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. That's not conservative. I don't know what label you'd put on it, but it sure isn't conservative.
And you've gone on the record supporting Israel.
I have. But I mean, here's a time, your viewers are going to connect with this. We have American hostages right now today in Gaza, and he's standing with Hamas. He's making light and being an anti-Semite.
Has he specifically said he supports Hamas? Not that I have seen.
No, but you add up what he said about women being second-class citizens. They're here to serve men. There's a video that's running around on YouTube for that. He said these things about the Jewish community being anti-Semitic. That all lines up with Hamas.
But here's where it begins to lead my line of thought, is that there appears to be two Republican parties developing. There's one party that is sort of the Trump faction, and then there's the more traditional conservatives. Do you see this schism happening within the party? Because Donald Trump has his rock-solid 44%, but it almost never wavers either way. Mark Robinson seems to be in that same camp. Is there now developing two separate Republican parties?
Well, there's a Republican Party that if they pick Mark Robinson, they're going to lose in the fall. There's that. And then there's the real conservative party, which I lead, and I would contend that I'm pushing forward, that is going to lower taxes and do the other things I'm talking about with stronger on crime and education. What they're trying to do is, I'm not quite sure where they're heading with these Holocaust things, with talking about women being second-class citizens. I don't know what label you put on that. I call it losing.
Are you confident that the people who consider themselves strong Trump supporters, and in a lot of cases Robinson supporters, will come back to the party and vote for the nominee?
I don't think the Trump supporters that support Mark Robinson know anything about this guy. That's why I said he's not who he...
they will come back. If you're the nominee, you feel they'll
Of
come back and
course,
support
of
you.
course. They'll say, look, that guy's wrong for North Carolina, he's wrong for the Republican Party, and he's wrong to be on the ticket, at the top of the ticket in this state, because he's going to be a drag on the ticket. He's going to put at risk all these other candidates that you're going to interview.
There are going to be a lot of people, I would argue, who are Trump supporters who will not vote for any other candidate for president.
I take issue with that only because I think once informed, they will know the right decision to make, and they'll pick Bill Graham when they go in to vote.
Well, but I'm saying
weeks.
at the presidential level, I think a lot of Trump supporters will not support any other presidential candidate if Donald Trump is the nominee. And I don't know about the governor's race, but I think at the national
Well,
level,
let me make this point, and your viewers should be able to keep this in mind whenever this is said and done. If Mark Robinson is at the top of the ticket, let me tell you that there is a risk that Donald Trump loses this state.
Well, he's got a 10% lead, Trump.
Well, go to fall and consider the things that he has said. So the primary is about selecting a winner, and you want that winner to be able to capture that conservative vote. Robinson's not going to be able to do that when it's all said and done in the fall.
All right,
he's going to lose.
One other issue before we have to go to break here.
Sure.
And you've advocated for the death penalty for some crimes, including fentanyl dealing. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
All right. Is that a tough sell?
Not to those people who have lost loved ones to fentanyl. Fentanyl is an extremely toxic, deadly, very minute quantities will kill you. Just as well, probably better than some bullets. I mean, if you could take a shot with a bullet, you might survive that. If a little bit of fentanyl gets in you, you're done.
Let me play devil's advocate on this, though. Do you believe in second chances for some folks and the idea of rehabilitation?
Rehabilitation has been one of those things debated for a long time. I've seen it work in some people and not in others. But where I come from is you have to send a strong message to the public that you are going to enforce the law, you're going to be tough on crime, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
What about helping people re-enter society, though, once that's done their time?
That's up to the Department of Corrections.
Can we do better, though?
We can always do better. We can do better at the border, keeping this stuff from coming in the first place. That's what we ought to be able to do.
This idea of parental control over education. What does that look like in your point of view?
More parental involvement in education, making sure that the parents understand what the children are being taught. And I'm not talking about parents getting involved in the day-to-day lesson plans. You teachers know what I'm talking about when I say that. But what I'm interested in is making sure that the parents know what subject matter we're talking about, what's on the syllabus for this particular course or this particular term. That's what needs to be clarified.
Once they know how much authority should they have to say, I don't want my child being taught that?
They should have input with the teacher and the administrators about why are you teaching this and not this other thing, and they should have some say in what their children are being taught. I've made it plain before. Children don't belong to the state. They belong to their parents. And you should teach children, not indoctrinate them, as many parents have complained to me that is going on.
All right, still a lot more to come, including fighting the threats from China. How much do you really pay in taxes, and whether North Carolina needs a family values commission? Stick around.
It's back by popular demand. All furniture in our showroom has been marked half off. Get half off every sofa at every showroom. It's the half off sale only at Colfax Furniture and Mattress. Bring it home.
This is how it feels to live purposefully, to live gracefully. When you have a health partner who doesn't just treat part of you, they care for all of you. That's why more people prefer Atrium Health, because unrivaled care is easier, more accessible, and more complete than ever before. Because the only way to be your best self is with your best health. That's what it means to live meaningfully, to live joyfully, to live fully.
Who's this?
Oh, he's my stunt double.
Okay.
The new Multiply the Cash scratch-offs have a win-all doubler, so I could win every single prize doubled.
So...
That's too much excitement for just one man.
Jerry, we won. We won. We won!
Technically, I won.
multiply the cash with a chance to win every prize doubled.
Riddle Tractor has all the tools you need to create and maintain beautiful lawns and landscapes. Come check out their full line of Skag residential and commercial mowers, extensive parts section, and newly renovated service department. Riddle Tractor, equipping those who get the job done.
Our family stories are your family stories, except with more confetti.
Relive racing history with a walk along Glory Road, or try your hand at our fan favorite racing simulator or pit crew challenge. Feel the passion and thrill of racing with stories and artifacts from the legends who shaped the sport in the Hall of Honor and Heritage Speedway.
Visit the NASCAR Hall of Fame in Charlotte for the ultimate outing. NASCAR Hall of Fame, this is our sport. This is our house.
Most people spend the majority of their life at work. Think about it, you're there 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. All you really want to do is do your job. When you get hurt, you can't. Let me ask you a question. What is the first thing a workers' comp insurance company does if you're hurt on the job? Send you to their doctors. Their doctors. They're the ones that pay them, not you. You need to find someone to make sure that you're treated fairly.
Not all canned beans are the same. To show you why Goya black beans are so good, we brought in the experts.
Approved.
Approved.
Approved. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
There's no better time to update every room in your house than the half-off sale at Colfax Furniture and Mattress. Get half off and special financing right now at Colfax Furniture and Mattress. Bring it home.
Welcome back to Swing State. I'm Bob Buckley, along with Republican gubernatorial candidate Bill Graham. We spoke earlier about how border security isn't traditionally a state issue, and same can be said for what has to be considered foreign policy, in this case dealing with a threat that China poses to the U.S. And all right, let's take a look at that ad that you have about China's effect on America. Take a look.
Cannon Mills. I worked there in the weave room. Now it doesn't even exist. China shut it down, laid off thousands. I'm Bill Graham. It's time to stop China's infiltration of North Carolina. I've done it before. I stopped a Chinese company from dumping toxins on North Carolina farmers. As governor, I'll do it again. I'll make sure China can't buy property in our state. I'm Bill Graham. Let's tell China that North Carolina isn't for sale.
So what role does a state and a governor have in all this? Because, again, that's mostly a foreign policy issue, you would think.
I advocate the position that we ought to be able to arrest illegals irrespective of what your office is, or your local police department here, your local sheriff's department ought to be able to arrest and detain and get rid of to the federal government, U.S. Marshal, whatever, illegal aliens or illegal folks here improperly.
I think we have 1,500 Chinese nationals crossing our border every month is what I've read.
Yep.
And that's got to be for some purpose.
Give or take.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned you want lower taxes. I think you mentioned that a couple of times on this particular broadcast. If you look at where we stand regionally, state and local tax burden as of 2022 from the Tax Foundation, we're 23rd overall at 9.9%. South Carolina, a little better. They're 9th at 8.9%. Virginia's 43rd at 12.5%. You can imagine that because of the Northern Virginia effect there. Tennessee is 3rd overall at 7.6%. Georgia 8th at 8.9%. So we're pretty competitive with those states.
We could be, no. But remember, Tennessee has no state income tax.
Right, and I was going to get to that. Would you like to see us eliminate
Absolutely. And I think we're marching down that road, but I'd like to get there.
Do we need to increase other taxes to make up for that?
We're sitting on a ton of cash right now in Raleigh, and I think the money needs to be spent more wisely, but we need to get to no income tax as quickly as we possibly can.
Do you believe in recruiting businesses within tax incentives, as we've been doing?
We have to be strategic about the businesses that we recruit. Everybody can't work in an Amazon warehouse. We need to. One opportunity for us is we need to reshore all our pharmaceuticals and get it out of China and get it out of India and get it back to the United States. It will ensure supply and it will ensure quality and purity.
It's a national security issue, probably to a large degree.
Really well, as we well learned in the pandemic.
You have talked about a North Carolina Family Values Commission. What is that about? What does it look like?
It's making sure that we're considering the family in everything we do. Education, taxes, what jobs we're recruiting that we just talked about, making sure that the family is the central focus of government policy. That is what we need to do, because if you have strong families and you have a strong community, you have a strong state.
You know, we seem in this state to love to send Republicans to Congress, especially in the Senate. We've won 14 of the last 18 Senate races Republicans have in this state. They like split government. They like to send Democrats. We in this state love to put Democrats in the governor's mansion. They seem to like that balance. Do you see that, or is that just me reading the tea leaves from them?
Maybe it's tea leaves. I think they haven't had a good candidate to pick from for the governor's spot. I think they have a good candidate in me this time, and I'm ready to go.
This means a lot that you're spending a bunch of your own money.
Well, I'm the outsider. I don't come from government. I come from wherever your viewers come from. Right. I'm a working person. I own businesses. So I'm the outsider. So I'm not going to get the traditional lobbying money. I'm not going to get the traditional go along, get along type of support. I'm the outsider.
I normally wouldn't have to ask a member of either party, would you support the nominee if you don't win? But this is such a contentious race. You've mentioned the things you feel about Mark Robinson. Would you back the nominee, whoever it is, or would you going to qualify that?
Well, I'd have you ask Mark Robinson if he's going to support me.
I've tried to ask Mark Robinson a lot of things. He's not been as forthcoming.
Well, I think Mark Robinson needs to come on your show and tell you he's going to support me for the fall.
What are you hearing out on the campaign trail? How has the campaign been going?
They want me to keep going and go strong. Every day we're picking up support. I'm happy with where we are. What
issues are big? Are you hearing border?
I'm hearing border, I'm hearing taxes, I'm hearing education, and I'm hearing all the things that we've been talking about.
You know,
folks are nervous about the economy. Mm-hmm. They're nervous that this embedded inflation that we have that we need to tackle. They're worried. Their communities aren't safe. Every time you turn on the television, and I know here you run the news a lot, and you see gun violence, particularly with juveniles. And if you look back at the mass shootings that we've had in schools, they've all been relatively young offenders. Yeah. And we got to get after juvenile crime.
I get that. All right, Bill Graham, very good. That is our show for tonight. We hope you will join us each week at this time. We'll have the latest on the most important issues affecting your lives and hear from the candidates and elected officials who are in the middle of it all. Thanks for watching.